All because the woman he loved, the one that got away, was getting married today. She was marrying a notorious socialite, the kind of woman whispered about in their circle as a walking disaster. He couldn't bear to see her walk into that fire, so Zara had crashed the wedding. He'd sat in the living room all night, his eyes swollen and red. As dawn broke, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Caleb Reed, marry me. The voice was nonchalant, almost teasing, but Caleb immediately pictured the face it belonged to. The woman Zara's old flame was supposed to marry, the infamous party girl Beatrice Thorne. Your fiancé just stole my groom, Beatrice said, a smile evident in her voice. So I figured I'd steal hers. Fair's fair, right? Caleb was silent for a moment, then gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Fair enough. On the other end, Beatrice's eyebrow arched. Her tone was bold and unapologetic. Good. I'll reschedule the wedding for days from now. Get a new suit ready for your bride. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. Caleb was left staring at the table full of cold, untouched food. Suddenly, his vision blurred. He never thought that after all these years, he'd finally get his wedding. But the bride wasn't Zara, the groom wasn't him, and the woman he was set to marry wasn't Zara either. He'd known Zara Sterling for years. The first time he saw her, he was a goner. It was at freshman orientation. She was on stage in her navy and white school uniform, the student representative giving a speech. Sunlight streamed through the auditorium's floor-to-ceiling windows, tracing a golden halo around her sharp profile. The boys in the audience whispered and snuck photos with blushing faces. He just stood in the shadows at the back of the room, clutching his newly issued student ID. Back then, Zara Sterling was the golden girl of Northwood Prep. She aced every exam. Her shelves were lined with math Olympiad medals, and even the cuffs of her rolled-up sleeves carried a subtle scent of cedarwood perfume. Every move she made screamed old money elegance. She was from a different universe than a scholarship kid like him. And this girl, the object of every boy's affection, only had eyes for one person, Silas Vance, her childhood friend. Caleb had seen her organizing Silas's notes in the library. He'd seen her wait for him by the basketball court for an entire afternoon. He'd seen her scour the entire city for a limited edition CD Silas had mentioned offhandedly. The rumor was their families were old friends, that they were practically engaged since birth. Then came the summer after graduation. The news of the Sterling Corporation's overnight collapse dominated the financial news. The same Mr. Sterling who once rolled up to parent-teacher conferences in a Rolls-Royce jumped from the top of his corporate headquarters. The next day, Silas Vance was on a plane to England, leaving Zara alone to shoulder an astronomical debt. Her days became a blur of part-time jobs, exhaustion, and quiet desperation. That night, Caleb found a blackout-drunk Zara in the alley behind a bar. Her expensive dress was wrinkled and stained, her eyes bloodshot. She looked like a stray dog, abandoned and lost. He knelt to help her up, but she grabbed his wrist, her breath a mix of alcohol and something metallic like blood. Who are you? Caleb Reed, he said softly. We went to the same school. You probably don't remember. She didn't, but she let him take her home. That night, Zara was like a wild animal starved for comfort. She wrapped her arms around his neck, sat on his lap, and kissed him with a desperate force. He found out later that just half an hour before he'd found her, Silas had posted a new photo on Instagram, a shot of him kissing his new girlfriend under the Eiffel Tower. When she woke up, she insisted on making it right. She moved into his tiny square-foot studio apartment. They held each other for warmth, getting through the hardest days together. But he knew, even after he'd rescued the fallen heiress, that her heart never belonged to him. She had never forgotten Silas Vance. He'd seen her staring at Silas's photo on her phone late at night. He'd seen her eat nothing but instant ramen for 3 months to save up for a plane ticket to Paris. He'd seen her bolt out the door on his birthday the second she got a text from Silas. But Caleb was a fool in love. He stayed. He helped her rewrite her resume, went with her to drop off applications, and stood by her side when debt collectors came knocking. At their lowest point, he secretly sold his mother's only heirloom, a gold bracelet, just to buy Zara a decent suit for an interview. Slowly, things changed. She started remembering he took his coffee with 2 sugars. She'd text him reminders to eat dinner when he worked late. She'd gently drape a blanket over him when he fell asleep on the couch. He thought he had finally melted the ice around her heart, and she, in turn, rose from the ashes, clawing her way back to become the celebrated darling of the New York elite once more. Just when everything seemed to be heading in the right direction, Silas Vance came back, and everything snapped back to the beginning. She would race her car to the airport to pick him up in the middle of the night. She threw him a welcome home party, all past grievances forgotten. And when she heard he was getting married, she didn't hesitate for a second to go and crash the wedding. 7 years he had given her everything, and it still couldn't compete with a simple, "I'm back" from Silas. Finally, he was tired. He had no more love left to give. Caleb stood up and began to clean. He threw everything into trash bags, one piece at a time. The garbage truck came rumbling down the street. He watched as the sanitation workers tossed the bags into the compactor, crushing 7 years of his foolish, hopeless devotion. "What are you throwing out?" The front doors swung open. Zara's voice came from behind him. Caleb didn't turn around. "Just some useless stuff." He looked up at her. "Just cleaning up, getting rid of some junk." The simple sentence made Zara's expression change. She shoved past him and rushed into the apartment. "Who said you could touch my things?" She tore through drawers and closets, her face growing paler by the second. After ransacking the entire study and finding nothing, she bolted for the door. As they passed each other, Zara accidentally shoved him. Caleb stumbled, his forehead smacking hard against the door frame. Blood streamed down his face. Worried she'd lost something truly important, he chased after her without even tending to his wound. And then he saw the most absurd sight of his life. Zara, the woman with a severe case of mysophobia, was on her knees in the street, frantically digging through a pile of garbage bags. Seeing her panic, a pang of guilt hit him. "The truck already took my stuff," he explained, his voice strained. "You'll have to go to the landfill to find it. I was just throwing out my own things. I might have accidentally packed something of yours. I'm sorry." Only then did Zara notice the blood gushing from his head. She froze, her hand reaching for him before pulling back. "I was in a hurry. I didn't see." Once they were in the car, Caleb couldn't help but ask, "What did you lose? Was it that important?" Zara's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It was a long moment before she answered. She'd lost the heirloom locket she always sent out to be polished. Caleb's heart clenched. Tears welled in his eyes. That locket was the gift Silas had given her when they were teenagers, a promise of a future together. No wonder she was so desperate. Zara must have sensed the shift in his mood. She knew she couldn't hide what happened at the wedding, so she offered a weak explanation. "Before Silas's grandfather passed away, I promised him I'd look after Silas. And you know Beatrice Thorne's reputation. If he really married her, the rest of his life would be ruined. That's why I had to stop it. It was all just an excuse to placate him." She'd crashed the wedding because she was still in love with Silas and couldn't bear to watch him marry someone else. Her frantic search for the locket, a symbol of a promise long broken, was because deep down she still believed she was the one who should be marrying him. The thought sent a wave of sharp, twisting pain through Caleb's chest. He turned his head to the window, letting the wind dry the silent tears rolling down his cheeks. "Well, Beatrice found a new groom, so she won't be bothering Silas anymore. You can relax." His confident tone made Zara frown slightly. "Beatrice found someone else? Who told you that?" Caleb was about to tell her that he was the new groom when his phone rang, the sound jarring in the tense silence of the car. Zara answered, and Silas's sobbing voice filled the small space. "Zara, my parents are furious that I ran out on the wedding. They're making me kneel in the study, threatening me with the old family discipline. They're going to kill me. Zara, what do I do?" "I'm on my way." She hung up instantly and glanced at Caleb. "Caleb, something's come up. Can you go look for the locket for me first?" Caleb's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He just nodded, opened the car door, and stepped out onto the lonely street. After watching her car disappear into the darkness, he hailed a cab to the city landfill. The garbage trucks had already emptied their loads for the night. He stood before a mountain of trash, rolled up his sleeves under the dim floodlights, and began to search. He fought back waves of nausea from the overwhelming stench, digging for 5 solid hours before he finally found the bags he'd thrown out. He emptied every single box, but there was no trace of the locket. Just then, the housekeeper called. "Mr. Reed, I found the locket." It was under Miss Sterling's pillow. She must have tucked it there in her sleep. Caleb let out a bitter laugh. How much do you have to love someone to fall asleep holding a memento of them, lost in daydreams? And to think they shared a bed every night and he'd never even noticed. It was deep into the night now, and there were no cabs in this remote part of the city. He had no choice but to walk back. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. His feet were bleeding and his legs were swollen by the time he finally reached the apartment. He'd left in such a hurry he forgot his keys, and he was too exhausted to even knock. He leaned against the door and fell into a deep sleep. He didn't know how long he'd been there when someone shook him awake. He blinked groggily and saw Zara's assistant standing over him, his face edged with worry. "Mr. Reed, something's happened to Miss Sterling. You have to come to the hospital with me now." Caleb's mind was a fog. Before he could process what was happening, the assistant was pulling him into a car. The cold autumn wind cleared his head, and he finally managed to ask what was going on. The assistant looked uneasy, hesitating before pulling out his phone and showing a video. "Miss Sterling went to the Vance estate yesterday. She insisted on taking Mr. Vance's punishment for him. She took lashes before she passed out. They rushed her to the hospital." The video showed Zara's back, a bloody canvas of crisscrossing wounds, the skin split and raw. It was a horrifying sight. Each lash felt like it was striking his own heart, the pain so sharp it stole his breath. The assistant parked the car and walked him to the hospital room before leaving. The door was slightly ajar, and Caleb could clearly hear Silas's sobbing from inside. "Zara, why are you so foolish? I abandoned you and left the country. You should hate me. Why? Why did you crash my wedding? Why did you have to take those lashes for me?" Zara lay on the bed, her voice weak but laced with an undeniable, complicated affection. "When you first left, I did hate you. But as time went on, all I felt was relief. You were the boy I loved, and I didn't want you struggling with me in some run-down apartment, eating cheap takeout every day, working part-time until you collapsed from low blood sugar. You made the right choice." Her words made Silas's eyes redden. He couldn't help but pull her into a tight embrace. "So you've forgiven me, right? You crashed the wedding because you couldn't let me go, right? My parents said that if you took the punishment for me, you had to agree to marry me. You were willing when you said yes, weren't you?" Each question was like a sledgehammer blow to Caleb's heart, sending tremors through his entire body. Zara agreed to marry him. When he saw Zara nod, his already shattered heart broke into a million pieces. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering loudly on the floor. He didn't know how much time had passed before he finally picked it up and turned to leave. He had just reached the stairwell when Silas grabbed his arm from behind. "Caleb Reed, I know you saw everything. Zara never forgot me. You spent 7 years suffering with her, and all it took was one little trap I set, and she came running. It's always been me. What do you have that can compete with that?" It was only then that Caleb understood. The wedding to Beatrice Thorne was just a ploy. Its only purpose was to make Zara come and crash it. Silas's parents were probably in on it too, using the family punishment to corner Zara into agreeing to marry him. After all, now that Zara was successful again, they naturally wanted their precious marriage alliance back. The realization was so absurd it was almost funny. She gave you her entire heart, and you still manipulated her like this? Don't you feel ashamed? At the word, Silas's face twisted into an expression of disbelief. Manipulated? How did I manipulate her? Crashing the wedding, taking the punishment, agreeing to marry me. I never forced her to do any of it. It was all her choice. She loves me so much she'd do anything. And that's something you'll never have in your entire life. Every word was a dagger twisting in Caleb's heart, a fresh wave of agony. He had to admit everything Silas said was true. "Yes, it was her choice," Caleb said, his voice hollow. "So I respect her decision. Don't worry, I've already decided to walk away. I wish you both happiness." Silas shoved him. Caleb went tumbling down the flight of stairs, his body slamming against the concrete, leaving him bruised and bleeding. He lay in a growing pool of his own blood, trembling uncontrollably, his vision swimming. He forced his eyes open to see Silas looking down at him, a triumphant sneer on his face. "Walk away? You think you can just walk away? If the Sterlings hadn't lost their fortune, you wouldn't even be worthy of tying Zara's shoes. Today, I'm going to show you exactly where a cheap, social climbing pretty boy like you belongs. Stop dreaming about marrying up." After spitting out the vicious words, Silas clapped his hands. 3 thugs with bleached blonde hair emerged from the shadows. They swarmed Caleb, grabbing his arms and legs, holding him down as one of them slapped him hard across the face. Caleb had never been in a situation like this. He was terrified, his face pale as he struggled with all his might, but he couldn't break free. Their grips left bruising marks on his skin, his shirt half torn from his body. In his terror, he heard a familiar voice. "Silas, who is that? What are you doing here?" Silas turned to see Zara standing just a few feet away. He quickly motioned for the thugs to drag Caleb into the dark corner of the stairwell. "It's nothing. A nurse just asked me to fill out some paperwork. It's all done." A flicker of hope ignited in Caleb's despair. He fought harder, biting down on one of the thugs' hands and crying out for help. "Zara, save me." Zara, who had been about to turn away, froze. The cry was so familiar. "Did I just hear?" "You didn't hear anything, Zara. You must be hearing things," Silas said, his own heart skipping a beat. He quickly took her arm, trying to lead her away. But Zara felt something was wrong. Hearing the continued scuffling from the stairwell, she instinctively wanted to go check. "It sounds like something's happening. I'm going to take a look." The moment she took a step, Silas deliberately stumbled and fell to the ground with a loud thud. Seeing him fall, Zara immediately rushed back to help him up, her voice filled with concern. "What's wrong?" Silas squeezed out a few tears, looking at her pitifully. "I think I sprained my ankle." "It's nothing. You go ahead and check." Without a second thought, Zara helped him up and hurried back towards the hospital room, her voice echoing in the stairwell. "You're hurt. Where else would I go? Nothing is more important than you." Once she was gone, the thugs let out a collective sigh of relief, turning their angry glares on Caleb, whose mouth they had been covering. "What's the point of yelling? Miss Sterling heard you, and she still didn't give a damn about whether you live or die. Mr. Vance said you love seducing women. Today we're going to teach a pretty boy like you a lesson." Their blatant threats filled Caleb's eyes with sheer terror. He saw the handle of a knife sticking out of one of their pockets. The fear of death washed over him, and he instantly stopped struggling. The thugs were satisfied with his compliance. They loosened their grip, whispering among themselves that this place was too public and they should drag him to the parking garage. They started forcing him down the stairs. Caleb felt sick, but he choked back the urge to vomit, silently observing his surroundings. When they reached a corner and two of the thugs stopped to light cigarettes, he slammed his elbow into the third one and scrambled into a nearby room, locking the door behind him. The sound of pounding and cursing came from the other side. He looked around the empty room, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew the door wouldn't hold them for long. He ran straight to the window. Below was a large decorative fountain in a garden where patients were taking a walk. Without hesitating, just as the door was kicked open, he jumped from over feet up. He plunged into the fountain. The powerful impact of the water knocked the air from his lungs, and he slowly lost consciousness. After being unconscious for a day and a night, Caleb woke up to see Zara. She was sitting by his bed holding his hand tightly, her eyes filled with pain. "Caleb, how are you? Does it still hurt?" Caleb's eyes scanned the room, his voice hoarse. "I'm fine. What about those thugs?" "They've been taken to the police station. Don't worry. They dare to lay a hand on you. I won't let them get away with it," Zara said, her voice laced with a fury that seemed genuine. Caleb didn't care what happened to them. He asked the only question that mattered. "Did they say who hired them?" Zara froze for a second, then shook her head. "No. They just said they saw you alone and decided to take advantage. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have been so busy with my own things and neglected you. I'm the reason they targeted you." Caleb knew he would get no justice for what Silas did. He could only close his eyes, exhaustion washing over him. "What have you been so busy with lately?" Zara was silent for a moment. "Busy with company stuff." Hearing this, Caleb dug his nails into his palm. A tidal wave of bitterness crashed over him, and he finally had to ask, "Busy with company stuff? Or busy preparing for your wedding to Silas Vance?" "Caleb, where did you hear that?" Caleb's smile was so strained his eyes turned red. "You crashed his wedding. Everyone is saying it. That you did it because you were going to marry him." Realizing he'd only heard rumors, Zara's tense heart relaxed. She frowned. "It's just gossip, Caleb. You're my boyfriend. How could I possibly marry someone else? The company is just so demanding right now. Once things calm down, we can talk about our own wedding, okay?" She was still lying. So she was planning to hide her wedding to Silas from him. When that day came, Silas would be her husband, and what would he be? Her lover? A profound sense of absurdity washed over him, leaving him speechless. He closed his eyes, swallowing the bitter, acidic emotions, and answered her silently in his head, "There's no need to talk about our wedding. I will never marry you. And the day you marry Silas Vance, I'll be marrying someone else too." Seeing him remain silent, Zara changed the subject. "The doctor said you've been under too much stress lately, and that's why you're overthinking things. I've told my assistant to clean my schedule. I'm going to spend the next few days with you." For the next 2 days, she stayed by his side in the hospital room. She took him to his follow-up appointments, changed his dressings, fed him soup, and brought him water. She was the picture of a devoted partner. The nurses who came in for rounds were green with envy. "Your girlfriend is amazing, staying by your side like this. She really yes on you." Caleb's expression was numb. He didn't respond. Only he knew that while Zara's body was here, her heart was miles away. The moment he rested, she would pull out her phone, the smile she tried to suppress playing on her lips as she texted. Once, when she was out of the room, he glanced at the phone she'd left on the table. He unlocked it and saw her iMessage history with Silas. Silas said he was craving something, and she immediately ordered 2 of everything. One to be delivered to him, and one she'd bring back to the hospital for herself. Silas said he missed her late at night, and she sent him a stream of selfies, even recording voice notes of herself singing to lull him to sleep. Silas said he hadn't been out shopping in a long time, and she created a detailed itinerary for a date, planning to take him in a couple of days. Whether Silas was complaining, venting, or just sharing something from his day, Zara would reply instantly. If she was a minute late, he'd get a little jealous and she would patiently soothe him. "Are you ignoring me because you're still taking care of your boyfriend? If you're marrying me, aren't you going to break up with him?" Zara took an hour to reply to that message. The response was just a few words. "Caleb was with me for years. I can't just end it like this. So this wedding is just an obligation for you?" This time her reply was faster, and it cut Caleb to the core. "No, I'm marrying you because I love you." Staring at the endless scroll of messages, Caleb thought about how when they were together, Zara was mostly silent. He'd share something about his day, and she might reply with a simple "okay" or message him hours later. When they went on dates, her mind was always elsewhere. Even after he'd taken a knife for her and their relationship had supposedly deepened, she had never been as proactive or passionate with him as she was with Silas. In their relationship, he had always been the one to walk steps hoping she would take the final one. But she had always held back, caught up in old memories and old flames, refusing to give him the one thing he wanted. So from now on, he wouldn't wait anymore. She bought flowers, ordered a cake, and even arranged a candlelight dinner at a restaurant on a hill overlooking the city. After lighting the candles, she placed a birthday hat on his head, her voice incredibly gentle. "Happy birthday, Caleb. What's your wish this year?" Caleb closed his eyes, clasped his hands together, and made a solemn wish in his heart. "I wish for my wedding to go smoothly, and I wish for Zara Sterling to get her heart's desire and marry Silas Vance. From this day forward, may we have nothing to do with each other." When he opened his eyes, he met Zara's beautiful gaze. "What did you wish for? Tell me. If I say it out loud, it won't come true." Zara smiled at his answer and ruffled his hair. "If you don't tell me, how can I help you make it happen?" Caleb blew out the candles, his gaze falling upon her. His voice was light. "You can make any wish come true. Any wish." He smiled back at her confident tone. "You don't need to help. My wish is simple. It will definitely come true." With that, he got up and went to the restroom. By a cruel twist of fate, he ran into Silas. Silas glanced at him, his tone dripping with disdain. "Zara brought you to this place? I can't believe she still remembers my favorite restaurant after all these years. Tell me, did she bring you here for a date or to reminisce about me?" Seeing the smug look on his face, Caleb turned off the faucet, wanting to ignore him, but Silas pressed on. "That birthday cake looks familiar. Let me guess. Zara gets you this one every year, right? It's the only one I ever wanted for my birthday. And the food on your table, the truffle pasta, the seared scallops, the dry-aged ribeye, all my old favorites. Do you like them too? I was looking through our old yearbook the other day. You had curly hair in high school, didn't you? Your current haircut, the short, slightly tousled style, it's exactly how I wore mine back then. And you're so thin. From a distance, you almost look like me. And a few other things, the clothes you're wearing, the watch on your wrist. all brands I loved 6 or 7 years ago. My taste has changed since then. Tell me, for one person to become a shadow of another, is it just a coincidence or is it intentional? When Zara molded you into this, was it because it's her type or because she could never forget me? With every word, the color drained from Caleb's face. He looked down at himself. The clothes, the shoes, the watch, all gifts from Zara. And the clean, stylish haircut in the mirror was one she had personally taken him to a top stylist for. The dishes and the cakes Silas mentioned were indeed frequent staples at their dinner table. Silas was still listing examples as Caleb listened. Flashes of the past played in his mind. The gifts she gave him, the places she took him for dates, the way she'd kissed the lobe of his ear. Every single detail was tied to Silas. In an instant, Caleb's heart began to tremble. All this time, Zara had only ever seen him as Silas's replacement. All the love and affection she had shown him was just poison-coated in sugar. By the time he snapped out of it, half an hour had passed. He stared at his own numb, hollow face in a mirror, his heart a dead, empty landscape. He splashed cold water on his face and dragged his heavy feet back to the dining room. Zara and Silas were deep in conversation, laughing and animated, having seemingly forgotten he even existed. It wasn't until he reached the table and downed a large glass of water that she noticed him. "Caleb, what took you so long? Are you not feeling well?" Caleb put the glass down, looked at the table of cold food, and said flatly, "Yeah, not feeling great. I'm heading home." He grabbed his bag and turned to leave. Zara froze for a few seconds, then grabbed her coat and chased after him, catching his arm. "What happened? Why are you suddenly upset? You haven't even had your cake. Can't you wait a little longer?" Caleb closed his eyes wearily. He was about to say he was tired when Silas walked up, a smirk on his face. "I had a few drinks so I can't drive. Zara, can you give me a ride? I'm sure your boyfriend won't mind, right?" He'd said it casually, but Zara agreed without a second thought. Silas slung an arm around Caleb, pulling him towards the curb and pretending to be friendly. Zara was fumbling for her car keys when a sudden scream pierced the air. She whipped around and saw a car barreling straight for the two of them. Her heart stopped. She sprinted, throwing her arms around Silas and tackling him out of the way, rolling them both to safety on the sidewalk. Caleb was left standing alone in the car's path. The impact sent him flying. He crashed hard onto the pavement, and a pool of dark red blood quickly formed beneath him. It felt like his organs had been rearranged. His muscles seized and twitched uncontrollably. A tidal wave of pain washed over him, tearing at his nerves. He saw Zara helping Silas up, blowing on a small scrape on his palm. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his vision went black. When he opened his eyes again, the doctor was looking at him with relief. "You were seriously injured, but your will to live is strong. That's what pulled you through. Your friend has some minor injuries and is a bit shaken up, but his girlfriend is with him, so don't worry. You should call your girlfriend to come and be with you." It took Caleb a moment to realize the doctor was talking about Silas, and the girlfriend was Zara. Of course, he was critically injured and Zara was still with Silas. Anyone would assume they were the couple. A flicker of bitter irony crossed Caleb's face. He didn't bother to explain, just croaked out, "I don't have a girlfriend." The next second, the hospital room door opened, and Zara walked in with a thermos. "Caleb, what are you talking about?" Seeing the surprise on her face, Caleb looked away, his voice flat. "Nothing." Zara didn't press. She walked to his side, tucked him in, and poured him a glass of warm water. "Please don't be mad at me. By the time I saw the car coming, it was too late. Silas was closest to me, so I had to save him first. If I'd had just one more second, I would never have let anything happen to you." Caleb knew she was telling the truth, but for him, at this moment, the truth didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. The pain might fade with time, but the scar would remain forever. He lowered his eyes and murmured, "It was too late, and there's no going back." Zara didn't hear him clearly. She just handed him the water and said, "Caleb, the doctor says you're badly hurt and need to rest. I've contacted doctors in Europe. I'm arranging for you to go there to recover." Caleb looked up, his gaze calm as he met hers. "Europe? When are you planning to send me?" "I've booked a flight for 3 days from now." 3 days from now? Wasn't that the day she was marrying Silas? So she was planning to send him away. Caleb was about to speak when Zara's phone rang. Seeing Silas's name on the screen, She said a few quick words and rushed out of the room. It's settled then. Everything's arranged in Europe. Someone will be there to take care of you. As soon as I finish up my work here, I'll come and get you. Watching her retreating back, Caleb swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. Don't bother. On that day, I'm getting married too. What was the point of saying anything? It was all about to end. During his 2 days of recovery in the hospital, Zara would visit from time to time, but she never stayed for more than 10 minutes. Caleb didn't ask where she was going. He didn't have to. Silas was constantly sending him taunting messages, keeping him fully informed of their whereabouts. They were picking out wedding dresses and party favors, choosing wedding rings, finalizing decorations, and preparing invitations. Looking at the photos and videos, seeing the pure joy in Zara's eyes, Caleb felt nothing. He checked himself out of the hospital and went to a department store to buy a simple, well-tailored suit. He was carrying the bag home when he heard loud voices coming from inside his apartment. As he reached the door, he heard a friend of Zara's speaking. Zara, crashing the wedding was one thing, but are you really going to marry Silas Vance? Have you forgotten how he publicly broke off your engagement and humiliated you 7 years ago? Now you're throwing a big wedding and inviting so many people. Caleb is bound to find out. What will you do then? Zara took a sip of her drink, her expression calm. I'm sending Caleb to Europe tomorrow morning. As long as the guests keep their mouths shut, he'll be overseas. He won't know. You can hide it for a while, but not forever. It's not like Caleb's never coming back. You've always loved Silas, and he's the one you really want to marry, so just stop dragging Caleb along. Give him some money and let him go. At that, Zara frowned and immediately shot back. No, Caleb was with me through my darkest days. I can't do that to him. Besides, he loves me so much he'd never marry anyone else. No amount of money would make him leave me. Caleb heard every word. He hefted the bag in his hand. Never marry anyone else. Maybe once, but not anymore. He didn't want to be her groom. He pushed the door open. The sudden noise startled the group in the living room. Zara was shocked to see him back so suddenly. Caleb, you're out of the hospital? Why didn't you call me to pick you up? I know you're busy. Didn't want to bother you. Seeing his normal expression, everyone assumed he hadn't overheard them and relaxed, laughing awkwardly to cover it up. Caleb had no desire to be around them. He made a few excuses and went upstairs. A short while later, after sending everyone off, Zara came into the bedroom. What did you buy? A black suit. I really liked it, so I bought it. Caleb had just opened his suitcase when Zara came over, reaching for the box of the suit. You like it that much? Let me see how nice it is. Caleb quickly pressed his hand over hers. I'll just finish packing. If you mess it up, I'll have to do it all over again. Don't look. Only then did Zara notice he was packing his suitcase. She nodded. Let me help you. I'll drive you to the airport tomorrow. Watching her bustling around, folding his clothes and packing his things, Caleb looked away and said nothing. Neither of them slept much that night. They were both awake by 4. Perhaps out of guilt, Zara made breakfast, knowing he had a long day ahead. Caleb didn't refuse. After a silent meal, Zara picked up his suitcase, ready to take him to the airport. They were halfway there, the sky just beginning to lighten, when Silas's call came through. Zara, it's 5:30. Are you up? I'm coming to pick you up at 6. My parents are waiting. Why aren't you here yet? Zara glanced at the time, then at Caleb. Caleb, can you get a taxi to the airport yourself? I have to. Before she could finish, Caleb opened the car door and got out. Go on. You're busy. Okay. Be safe and call me when you get to Europe. I'll come join you as soon as I'm done with work here. Caleb listened quietly to her instructions, saying nothing. Once her car had sped off and disappeared into the morning light, he took out his phone and called Beatrice Thorne. I'm ready. The car window rolled down, revealing a face that was bright and audacious. The woman had one hand on the steering wheel, an eyebrow arched, and a playful smirk on her lips. The top 2 buttons of her white silk blouse were undone, revealing a sharp collarbone and an air of wild, untamable energy. Get in, groom. Caleb froze for a second. This was the first time he'd seen Beatrice Thorne in person. Just like the rumors said, she exuded a roguish, carefree vibe, yet there was something about her that was utterly captivating. Do we need to make such a scene? He asked, glancing at the long line of luxury cars behind her, a slight frown on his face. Beatrice let out a low laugh. She pushed the door open, her long legs swinging out as she stood before him. When she looked up at him, her eyes held a teasing glint. It's a wedding heist. If the scene isn't big enough, it wouldn't be worthy of my name, would it? She held out her hand, palm up. Her fingers were long and slender. Last chance. Are you sure you're coming with me? Caleb looked at the outstretched hand, his own fingers curling slightly before he placed them in hers. I'm sure. His voice was soft but firm. The smile in Beatrice's eyes deepened. She suddenly gripped his wrist. Since you've decided, let's not waste time. Her laugh was unrestrained as she pulled him towards the lead car. When I get married, I do it in broad daylight. He was ushered into the passenger seat. Beatrice leaned against the door, reaching across to buckle his seat belt. The faint scent of orange blossoms from her perfume washed over him. She was so close that her breath practically brushed against his ear. Caleb's ear tips burned, and he instinctively turned his head away. Nervous? She murmured, her voice husky and alluring. Don't worry, I don't bite. She closed his door, walked around to the driver's side, and slammed her foot on the gas. The sports car roared to life and shot forward. Behind them, dozens of luxury cars followed in a spectacular procession, drawing stares from everyone on the street. At the same time, in another motorcade, Zara Sterling stared out the window at the rapidly receding scenery, a strange emptiness blooming in her chest. Silas held her hand, his voice filled with joy. Zara, I'm finally marrying you. This has always been my dream. He looked down at her, his eyes full of anticipation. What about you? Marrying me is your dream too, right? Zara lowered her gaze to meet his expectant one, her expression flickering. Of course. But as the words left her lips, an image of Caleb's face flashed uncontrollably in her mind. Caleb in his most desperate moments, kneeling in the alley behind a bar, cautiously asking, Are you okay? Caleb selling his mother's only heirloom bracelet just to buy her a decent suit, and then smiling as he said, I never really liked it anyway. Caleb burning with a high fever, still trying to make her hangover soup only to collapse in the kitchen. The memories flickered past like a movie reel, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, a dull, suffocating ache. Silas noticed her distraction and his eyes reddened slightly. It's our wedding day, and you're thinking about someone else? You've fallen for him, haven't you? Zara snapped back to reality, pushing down the strange feeling in her heart and pinching his cheek. You know exactly who I love, don't you? Silas's tears turned to a smile. Then as punishment, you have to kiss me. Zara leaned in and pressed her lips to his. But the moment they touched, she inexplicably thought of Caleb. After the kiss, Silas pulled her into his arms. The driver suddenly spoke up. Miss Sterling, there's another wedding motorcade up ahead. According to tradition, the brides should exchange bouquets for good luck. Zara, distracted, just hummed in agreement and lowered the window. And then she found herself looking directly at Beatrice Thorne, who was in the opposite motorcade dressed in a sharp suit and holding a bridal bouquet. Their eyes met. Zara's smile, which had been directed at Silas, vanished the moment she saw who was in the car opposite them. The color drained from her face. She stared, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief at Caleb, who sat in the passenger seat of the other lead car. She never imagined that Caleb, who was supposed to be at the airport, would be here dressed in a suit, sitting in another wedding car, watching her exchange bouquets. Caleb, Zara whispered his name, her voice trembling. She didn't see the twisted, savage look that flashed across Silas's face at the sound of that name. Caleb merely gave her a cool, indifferent glance before turning his attention to Beatrice, watching as she gracefully swapped her bouquet with Zara's. His movements were fluid and natural, as if the woman before him wasn't the person he had once loved to the point of madness, but a mere stranger he'd passed on the street. Stop the car. Zara slammed her hand against the door, her voice raw and furious. Stop the car right now. The driver instinctively hit the brakes, forcing the entire motorcade to a halt. Across the way, Beatrice's motorcade also stopped at her signal. The two processions stood in a silent standoff on the bridge. Beatrice leaned back languidly in her seat, her gaze shifting to Zara, her tone laced with amusement. Well, if it isn't Miss Sterling. In such a hurry to get to your second wedding. Zara ignored her completely, her eyes locked on Caleb. He looked incredibly handsome today in a way she had never seen before. He wasn't wearing the flashy Silasesque suit she had imagined. Instead, He wore a simple, elegant white suit that made him look as fresh and clean as a morning after spring rain. Zara had always tried to dress Caleb up as a stand-in for Silas, but she had never realized how much more captivating he was when he was just being himself. Silas was fuming. He glared at Caleb, but his eyes met Beatrice's cold, sharp gaze, and a shiver ran down his spine. The chilling look vanished in the next second, but the feeling lingered, and the angry words he was about to say died in his throat. Zara didn't notice Silas's strange reaction. Her hands gripped the car window frame so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Caleb, what are you doing?" Caleb looked at her, his eyes as calm and still as a stagnant pool. He glanced down at the bouquet Beatrice now held, a bouquet that was beautiful but uninspired, and sighed softly. "As you can see," he said, "getting married." "Are you kidding me? Who gave you permission to marry her?" Zara exploded, slamming her fist against the car door and shouting over Silas's attempts to restrain her. Beatrice wrapped a lock of Caleb's hair around her finger and scoffed. "Listen to you, Miss Sterling. You're on your way to get married too. What? You're allowed to start fires, but I'm not allowed to light a candle." The words made Zara's temples throb. Her eyes darted back to the other car, and she noticed a diamond ring on Beatrice's ring finger. Then she looked at Caleb's hand. He was wearing a matching one. They were a pair of snowflake-shaped diamond rings glittering coldly in the sunlight. Zara remembered Caleb had once told her this was his favorite design. Now he was finally wearing it, but someone else had put it on his finger. The thought filled her gaze with hostility as she looked at Beatrice. "Caleb, stop this nonsense." She suppressed her anger, but her voice was still shaking. "I know you're still mad at me, but marriage isn't a game. I have my reasons for this. Just wait for me to handle the Vance family's affairs." "Zara." It was the first time Caleb had ever interrupted her. His voice was soft, but it felt like a sharp knife stabbing straight into her heart. "Do you remember the birthday wish I made?" Zara froze. "My wish was for my own wedding to go off without a hitch." Caleb slowly looked up, a pale smile on his face. "And I wish you a happy marriage too." In an instant, she remembered Caleb's strange behavior on his birthday, his quiet statement that his wish would definitely come true, and his silence as he packed his bags. It all made sense now. The signs had been there all along. He had decided to leave her then. "No." Zara tried to shove the car door open, but Silas grabbed her hand. "Zara, it's our wedding day. What are you doing?" His words stopped her. She looked back at Silas, who was holding her tightly, his eyes red and pleading. It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped on her head, halting her absurd impulse. "I'm sorry, Silas. I just wanted to ask him why." "Because you were going to ship me off to Europe this morning," Caleb said calmly. "Because you're on your way to marry Silas Vance right now. Because for 7 years, you never truly loved me." Beatrice smoothly rolled up the window, and the car began to move. Her motorcade slowly pulled away from the bridge. A moment later, Zara's motorcade also started moving. As the two lines of cars drove in opposite directions, Zara fought the urge to look back. "Zara." Silas's voice brought her back to the present. "I'm sorry, Silas. I was just a little." Her explanation was weak and pale. She couldn't even find the right words. But Silas pulled her into his arms. "Zara, you don't have to say anything. I understand. Caleb was with you through some very hard times. He suffered with you, helped you get back on your feet. It's natural for you to feel something for him. But he's found his own happiness now. We should be happy for him." Silas seemed to have completely forgotten that the entire reason for their own wedding was because he was supposed to marry Beatrice, the unconventional heiress Zara deemed a disaster, a fiery pit she had to save him from. Zara held him tighter, wanting to say something, but the wedding venue was getting closer. It was too late. "It's fine," she thought. "After the wedding, I'll find Caleb and explain everything. He'll forgive me then." The air was filled with the sound of congratulations. Silas, in his expensive custom-made suit, glowed under the lights, his arm around Zara's shoulders, a brilliant smile on his face. Zara reined in her wandering thoughts and focused on the ceremony. As she slowly slid the ring onto Silas's finger, she found herself thinking unbidden of a snowflake ring on Caleb's hand. "Zara." Silas's voice, sharp with annoyance, broke through her thoughts. "You're supposed to kiss me now." Zara came back to herself and leaned in, gently kissing his lips. They had been separated for 7 years, and now they had overcome every obstacle to stand here at the altar. Yet in this moment, Zara didn't feel the joy she had expected. Meanwhile, in another ceremony, Beatrice got out of the car first, then walked around to open Caleb's door, bowing slightly as she helped him out. They stood together on the stage, the priest's solemn words washing over them, flanked by guests whose gazes were a mixture of curiosity and envy. When Beatrice took his hand to place the ring on his finger, her touch was just right, not too cold, not too hot. When she followed the priest's instruction to kiss him, her lips brushed his briefly like a carefully choreographed performance. Gentle, restrained, but convincing enough to make everyone believe she truly loved him. The moment the kiss ended, thunderous applause erupted. Beatrice linked her arm with his, smiling and acknowledging the crowd's good wishes. She leaned close to his ear, her breath warm, her voice low and laced with a smile. "Not bad, Mr. Reed. You're a natural." Caleb's eyelashes fluttered. His lips maintained a perfect, polite curve as he whispered back, "You too, Mrs. Thorne." To any outsider, they looked like a deeply devoted couple. By the time the reception ended and they returned to the Thorne estate, it was late. Caleb slipped off his shoes, his bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. Beatrice followed behind him, having already changed out of her elaborate wedding gown. She radiated a lazy, roguish charm. "Tired?" she asked casually, pouring him a glass of water, her tone as nonchalant as if she were asking about the weather. Caleb took the glass, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second before pulling apart. He looked up at her and asked directly, "Now that we're alone, can you tell me the real terms of this marriage, Miss Thorne?" Beatrice's eyebrow arched, and she suddenly smiled. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to him, her voice tinged with amusement. "Mr. Reed, you really are as smart as they say." She turned around, her gaze sharp and direct. "Our marriage is, in essence, a partnership." "A partnership?" "That's right." She took a few steps closer, looking down at him with a half-smile playing on her lips. "I need a husband to deal with my family and the media. You need a wife to escape Zara Sterling's shadow. We both get what we need. No strings attached." Caleb was silent for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. "Sounds fair." This Beatrice Thorne was clearly not the aimless party girl the tabloids made her out to be. The precision and sharpness she displayed now told a very different story. Beatrice, seemingly unaware of the thoughts racing through his mind, nodded. She pulled a file from a nearby bookshelf and handed it to him. "This is the addendum to our prenuptial agreement. Take a look. After today, we're husband and wife in name only. We'll have separate lives, separate finances. Of course, in public, we'll need to play the part of a loving couple." Caleb took the file, scanned it quickly, and then looked up. "And if one day one of us wants to end this?" Beatrice's eyes flickered, her tone light. "Then you give the other person 3 months' notice, and we part ways amicably. Deal." Caleb signed his name without hesitation and pushed the document back to her. Beatrice put the file away, then suddenly leaned in close, her long fingers tilting his chin up, the businesslike demeanor vanishing as her playful mask slipped back on. Her voice was a teasing whisper. "However, Mr. Reed, I suggest you start getting used to this role." She leaned her head to the side, her lips near his ear. "After all, starting tomorrow, the entire city will be watching us, wondering just how long this marriage will last." Caleb met her gaze, a slight smile on his lips. "Don't worry, Miss Thorne. I won't let you down." Beatrice let out a low, satisfied laugh. She released him and headed for the door. "Good night then, Mr. Reed." The door closed softly behind her. Caleb stood in place, looking at his reflection in the mirror, still dressed in his suit, and slowly let out a long breath. The next day, Caleb stood before the Thorne family mansion, suitcase in hand, staring up at the understated but luxurious estate. The entire property felt like a slumbering beast, quiet but dangerous. "Mr. Reed, Miss Thorne has instructed me to show you to the master suite so you can get settled." The butler had appeared at his side, his voice respectful but devoid of warmth. Caleb nodded and followed him across the courtyard. The fountain sprayed droplets that glittered in the sun, and the Juliet roses in the garden released a faint, sweet fragrance entirely different from the orange blossom perfume he was used to smelling in Zara's apartment. A subtle woody scent lingered in the air here, Beatrice's scent, he realized. The butler led him past the main hall and up to the 3rd floor. "The other family members do not reside here often. If you're interested, Mr. Reed, I can give you a tour of the estate after you've rested. Caleb stood on the landing, looking down at the magnificent but cold house, a silent weight settling over him. His fingers unconsciously traced the handle of his suitcase. The estate was enormous, and the portraits lining the hallways seemed to be watching him, their painted eyes scrutinizing the outsider. Miss Thorne mentioned that you will only be staying here temporarily. After you have met the elders, she will take you to her primary residence, the butler explained. It seemed neither of them, not even Beatrice, lived here full-time. Caleb gently pushed open the door to his room. Sunlight poured through the large windows, casting dappled light on the carpet. The room was simpler than he'd expected, with a large bed, a wall of bookshelves, and little else. He noticed the books were mostly on finance, their spines creased from what looked like frequent use. I will leave you now, Mr. Reed. Please let me know if you require anything. Miss Thorne will return later this evening to accompany you to the family dinner. Understood. Thank you. The door closed, leaving Caleb alone. He let out a long sigh, finally feeling a bit of the tension leave his body. He sat on the sofa and pulled out his phone, intending to ask Beatrice if there was anything he needed to know for the dinner. But in the next second, a call came through from Zara. The phone vibrated, her name flashing on the screen. Caleb hung up and blocked her number without hesitation. But then a flood of text messages poured in. Caleb, we need to talk. The wedding wasn't what you think. I never stopped loving you. Caleb tossed the phone onto the bed and walked to the window, taking a deep breath. 7 years of his life, all a lie, a role as a stand-in. He couldn't understand how Zara could still say such things with a straight face. He ran a hand through his short hair, the same style Silas used to have, the one Zara had taken him to get. Footsteps approached from outside. Caleb quickly wiped the unshed tears from the corners of his eyes. The door opened. Beatrice leaned against the frame, her jacket slung casually over her shoulder. Looks like Mr. Reed has settled in. Her voice had its usual light-hearted tone, but her sharp eyes caught the redness in his. Caleb's nails dug into his palm as he forced a smile. I just got here. Was about to unpack. Beatrice walked into the room, closing the door behind her. She smelled faintly of alcohol mixed with her woody perfume, a strange, contradictory combination. The dinner has been moved up, Beatrice said. My grandfather wants to meet you now. But I thought. Caleb felt a jolt of panic. What should I prepare? Nothing. Beatrice rummaged through the walk-in closet and, after a moment, pulled out a designer suit, handing it to him. Wear this. The color will look good on you. Caleb took the suit. The fabric was cool and silky to the touch. Why do you have men's clothes in your room? Beatrice raised an eyebrow. They were prepared for you, of course. What, are you jealous? We have a contract, remember? Caleb replied coolly, turning to change in the bathroom. He missed the complex flicker of emotion in Beatrice's eyes. When he came out, Beatrice was standing by the bookshelf, flipping through a financial journal. The sunlight outlined her profile, and behind her glasses, her eyes were focused and sharp, a world away from her public persona. Do you actually know about finance? Caleb couldn't help but ask, remembering the well-worn books he'd seen. Beatrice closed the journal instantly, slipping back into her rebellious guise. It's all an act. How else am I supposed to fool the investors? The family dinner was even more oppressive than Caleb had imagined. At the head of the long table sat Beatrice's grandfather, his hair white, but his eyes as sharp as a scalpel, raking over Caleb the moment he entered. Throughout the meal, relatives probed into his family background, their gentle inquiries hiding sharp, pointed questions. I hear Mr. Reed was previously engaged to Zara Sterling, Beatrice's aunt asked, smiling over her wine glass. How did he suddenly end up marrying our Beatrice? Caleb's fork scraped loudly against his plate. A strange sense of relief washed over him. Here it comes. He put on a smile, about to answer, when Beatrice suddenly grabbed his hand, her finger tracing a line across his palm. It seems Aunt Carol's memory is failing her in her old age, she said lazily. Caleb and I have been together for a long time. It's just that some people are too blind to see it. She turned to Caleb, her expression suddenly tender, her voice tinged with mock grievance. Isn't that right, darling? The endearment sent a strange jolt through Caleb. He played along, wrapping his arm around her waist. That's right, but it's all in the past now. After the dinner, Caleb returned to their room, completely drained. It hadn't been a dinner. It had been an interrogation. One wrong word, and they would have torn him apart. Beatrice had been summoned to her grandfather's study, leaving him alone. He stood by the window, watching the winding paths of the estate. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened softly. Beatrice walked in, reeking of alcohol. "You did well," she said, shrugging off her coat. "Grandfather is very pleased with you." Caleb turned and noticed that even in the warm light, Beatrice's face was pale with a fine sheen of sweat on her forehead. "Did you drink too much tonight at dinner?" Aside from a few bites of food he'd put on her plate, her wine glass had never been empty. Couldn't be helped. A bitter smile touched Beatrice's lips. She undid the top button of her dress, finally able to breathe. "If I didn't let them drink their fill, I never would have gotten away." As she spoke, she stumbled. Caleb rushed forward to steady her. As he touched her, he felt the abnormal heat radiating from beneath her dress. "Beatrice, you have a fever." Beatrice tried to push him away but collapsed weakly against him. Caleb managed to support her, helping her to the bed. When he unzipped her dress to help her, he gasped. Her back was covered in dark bruises, some already turning black. "What happened?" Caleb's voice was filled with disbelief. The marks were horrifying, given Beatrice's status. Who would dare do this to her? Beatrice kept her eyes closed, her tone flat. "Family discipline. Grandfather wasn't happy with my recent investment strategy. That's all." Caleb quickly found the first aid kit and began carefully cleaning her wounds. When the alcohol swab touched the worst of the bruises, he felt her arm tense. He looked up, but Beatrice didn't make a sound. "Why?" he asked softly. "You're not who they say you are." Beatrice's eyes snapped open. In the lamplight, they were clear and sharp, not the eyes of a drunken woman. "Who do they say I am? And who do you think I should be?" Caleb thought of the professional books on her shelf, her insightful comments about finance at the dinner table, and the brutal marks on her back. "You're pretending." He was beginning to understand, but he still didn't know why. "All that stuff they say about you, it's just an act." Beatrice pushed herself up, her gaze fixed on him. "You're a smart man." She reached out and brushed her fingers against his cheek. "What about you? Have you really gotten over Zara Sterling?" Caleb didn't flinch from her touch. "When I found out that 7 years of my life was just a game, that I was just a stand-in, my heart died." At his words, Beatrice's eyes deepened. She walked to the desk and took a file from the drawer, handing it to him. "Since we're partners, we should be honest with each other." Caleb opened the file. When he saw what was inside, his breath caught in his throat. It was the ownership structure of an investment firm under the Thorne Group umbrella. Beatrice Thorne held % of the shares. And not just this one. Beatrice leaned against the desk. "I have controlling stakes in 3 tech companies and shares in 2 biopharmaceutical firms. Grandfather wants me to take over the family's traditional businesses, but I'm investing in the future." "So you pretend to be an ignorant heiress?" "It's a smokescreen. This persona lowers everyone's expectations," Beatrice continued, "including my grandfather's. That way, when I finally make my move, there's less resistance." She walked back to Caleb, leaning in so they were eye to eye. "Now you know my secret, Mr. Reed." Caleb looked into her deep, dark eyes, and his heart skipped a beat. "And why are you willing to tell me all this?" "Because," Beatrice's gaze swept over his face without reservation, "because I've realized we're the same kind of people, both using different methods to escape the expectations and control of others." The night deepened. Moonlight streamed through the window, bathing them both in its soft glow. Caleb suddenly realized this marriage of convenience might be far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The spot had once been neatly arranged with Caleb's daily essentials. He would sit there scrolling through his phone while fixing his hair, and Zara would often lean against the headboard, watching him quietly. In the turbulent story of her life, those had been rare moments of peace. Now the space was empty. Her phone screen went dark again, the call still unanswered. Zara stared at the name Caleb on her screen until the letters blurred. Her chat history was a one-sided monologue, messages sent into a void with no reply. The last one she'd sent read, "Caleb, stop this. Come home." "Ma'am, your coffee." The butler carefully placed the cup on the nightstand. Zara turned and saw it was in the exact spot where Caleb used to leave a glass of warm water for her every night. She just stood there, not touching the coffee. She had only asked for it out of habit, a reflex upon returning home. Every time she came home, Caleb would bring her a cup. The room was silent. Suddenly, her eyes were drawn to the slightly ajar nightstand drawer. She saw a familiar-looking box. Her heart leaped. She pulled the drawer open. Inside was a black velvet jewelry box containing a blue sapphire bracelet they had bought at an auction last year. Caleb had adored it. Now it lay there, covered in a thin layer of dust, forgotten. Did he leave anything else? Zara heard her own voice, dry and hoarse like a desperate traveler in a desert. The butler hesitated. Mr. Reed threw most of his things away. He only took some clothes and a few books. The collectibles and video games you gave him are all in the safe in the study. Zara stumbled to her feet and rushed to open the safe. The combination was still Caleb's birthday. The jeweled cufflinks, the watch, the bracelets she'd given him, and the diamond ring she had planned to give him at their wedding. They were all still there. Thump! Zara's fist slammed against the metal door of the safe, her knuckles immediately splitting, beating with blood. She felt no pain, only a gaping wound in her chest that was bleeding profusely. She thought back to Caleb's birthday a month ago, the way his eyelashes had trembled as he made a wish, and his, if I say it out loud, it won't come true. So he had already decided to leave her back then. Zara, Silas's cheerful voice came from the doorway. Why aren't you answering your phone? Mom and Dad want us over for dinner tonight. Zara turned mechanically. Silas was wearing a white shirt, a style so familiar it made her stomach churn. Caleb, the name slipped out. Silas froze, the smile wiped from his face. What did you say? Nothing. Zara rubbed her temples. I'm not going tonight. I have work. Work again. Silas's voice turned sharp. Ever since you ran into Caleb on that bridge, you've been completely out of it. He's married to Beatrice Thorne now, and the whole city is laughing at us. Zara's head snapped up, her glare so fierce it made Silas take a step back. Who are they laughing at? Silas bit his lip, hesitating. Everyone's saying he dumped you, that he was hooking up with Beatrice Thorne all along. Get out. Silas, I said get out. Zara's roar seemed to shake the entire house. Silas, who had more to say, could only glare at her with red-rimmed eyes before storming out and slamming the door. Silence returned to the room. Zara slid to the floor, her phone lighting up with a call from her assistant. Did you find him? Yes, Miss Sterling. I found him. Mr. Reed's schedule for today. He'll be at the Southside Art Center at p.m. for an exhibition. Hearing her assistant stumble over the name, Zara's chest heaved, but it felt like a heavy stone was crushing her, making it impossible to breathe. The painting before him was a canvas of shattered blues, like a torn-up sea or, if you looked closer, a weeping eye. Caleb was wearing a simple cream-colored turtleneck and well-fitting jeans, the snowflake diamond ring on his left hand glittering under the gallery lights. Good taste. This piece is called Spilled Water. Caleb turned at the sound of the voice. Beatrice had appeared at his side, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was wearing a dark gray trench coat that sharpened her features. What are you doing here? I thought you had a meeting. Caleb took the coffee, his fingertips brushing against hers, a warm, dry sensation. Beatrice shrugged. It ended early. My assistant told me you were here. Figured you might need this. She pulled a black credit card from her pocket. After the exhibition, there's a small private auction. If you like it, buy it. Caleb shook his head. That's too much. Beatrice tilted her head, studying him for a moment before pushing the card forward again. Think of it as a wedding gift, husband. She leaned close to his ear, her warm breath ghosting over his skin. Don't forget, we're a devoted couple now. Her voice was teasing, but Caleb noticed she wasn't wearing perfume today, just a clean, fresh scent of mouthwash. This unintentional realness was more captivating than any deliberate performance. Mr. Reed, enjoying the art? A deep male voice cut through their moment. Silas strode toward them, his bright red t-shirt a bleeding wound in the quiet gallery. Caleb's body tensed at the sound of his voice. Beatrice subtly stepped in front of him. Mr. Vance, what a coincidence. It's no coincidence. I came here specifically for him. Silas pointed a finger straight at Caleb. What? You can't face people alone now that you've latched onto someone rich. His voice was jarringly loud, drawing glances from other patrons. Caleb took a deep breath and stepped out from behind Beatrice. What can I do for you? Silas looked him up and down with open contempt, then sneered. Stop pretending to be so pure. Everyone knows you were just a plaything Zara got tired of. I bet Miss Thorne doesn't know that he was with Zara for 7 years. He even knows her favorite position in. Smack. The crisp sound of a slap echoed through the gallery. Caleb's hand was still in the air, trembling slightly from the force. Silas clutched his face, his eyes wide with disbelief. You hit me. Why shouldn't I? This is to teach you some manners, Caleb said, his voice soft but every word cutting. Zara and I are over. Please stay out of my life. A venomous glint appeared in Silas's eyes. He suddenly raised his coffee cup to throw it at Caleb. Beatrice reacted instantly, pulling Caleb out of the way. The entire cup of hot coffee splashed onto her. Security. Beatrice's voice was sharp. 2 guards immediately ran over. She stood beside Caleb, careful not to get the stains on him, but her protective stance made their closeness obvious to everyone. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. Please escort this gentleman out, and notify all Thorne-owned establishments that Silas Vance is permanently banned. Silas's face went white. You wouldn't dare? Why wouldn't I? Beatrice took off her coffee-splattered glasses, her tone nonchalant. You must not be keeping up with your own company's news, Mr. Vance. As of this morning, a media subsidiary of the Thorne Group successfully acquired a % stake in your father's company. She slowly wiped her glasses. Oh, and by the way, she lowered her voice, ensuring only Silas could hear. Those photos from your trip to the Maldives last year were quite something. And the woman with you. She looked very familiar. I believe her last name was Lee. The blood drained from Silas's face. You. How could you? If Beatrice knew about that, what else did she know? Silas didn't dare to think. The next second, the guards had him by the arms. Show him out, Beatrice said, putting her glasses back on, her smile as sweet as ever. The guards immediately began dragging Silas away. Panic overwhelmed him. He struggled, screaming, Caleb Reed. You think she'll be any different? She's just using you too. The doors closed, cutting off his voice. Caleb finally came back to his senses, flexing his fingers and realizing he had been gripping Beatrice's hand the whole time. He quickly let go. Sorry, It's fine. Beatrice looked at the painting, spilled water. Do you like it? Caleb nodded, then quickly shook his head. It's too sad. But it's real. Beatrice raised a hand, signaling a staff member. After the auction, have this sent over. They had no desire to continue browsing. On the way back, Caleb was silent. Beatrice didn't mind, just turned up the heat in the car. It wasn't until they stopped in front of the mansion that Caleb finally spoke. Those photos, do you really have them? What he really wanted to ask was if the things she'd said about Silas were true. Beatrice turned to look at him, her expression complicated. Does it matter? The car was silent save for the quiet ticking of Beatrice's watch. No, Caleb said, meeting her gaze. I just wanted to thank you. I think you need to understand something. Even if our marriage is a sham, the title isn't. It's not just for show. Beatrice's voice was serious. From the moment you put on this ring, no one gets to bully you. Caleb caught the faint scent of coffee on her and looked up, meeting Beatrice's deep eyes. The usual playful glint was gone. In the dim light of the car, there was only a darkness he couldn't read. His palms were damp. He instinctively leaned back, but his back was already against the door. There was nowhere to go. Beatrice's eyes darkened for a moment before she looked away, her smile returning. There's a charity gala tonight. I've had clothes sent over. I'll pick you up at 7. Caleb nodded, watching as she got out, and walked around to open his door. As he passed her, Beatrice whispered, the photos are real. And not just Mrs. Lee. There's a Mr. Wan, a Miss Xiao. Caleb's head snapped up. Beatrice's expression was so calm it was almost cold. If you need them, these files will be on the desks of every major editor in the city by tomorrow morning. Where were you? Zara didn't turn around, her voice dangerously low. Silas stopped in his tracks, then lifted his chin, his tone defiant. Out for a walk. A walk. Zara's hand paused, and she finally turned to face him, her eyes sharp. A walk to the Southside Art Center to cause trouble for Caleb? Silas's expression faltered, but he quickly met her gaze with a cold sneer. You already know, don't you? What? He's married now, and you're still hung up on him. Zara stubbed out her cigarette, sparks flying. She advanced on him, her voice tight with suppressed rage. Silas, do you think just because I married you, you can do whatever you want? What did I do? Silas shot back, even angrier. He's the one who slapped me, and Beatrice Thorne threatened me for him. Enough. Zara cut him off. When you went after him, were you trying to humiliate him, or were you trying to remind me over and over again what I lost? Her glare silenced Silas. Zara closed her eyes, her voice raw. I knew you orchestrated the wedding crashing, but I chose to let it go. But you keep provoking him. Silas's eyes welled with tears. Because he's not good enough for you. He just took advantage of you when you were at your lowest. Now that you're back on top, and he couldn't compete with me, he ran off to the Thorne family. That kind of man. Shut up. Zara's hand flew up. Silas flinched, but instead of hitting him, she grabbed a nearby ashtray and hurled it against the cabinet. The sound of shattering crystal filled the room. She stared at Silas, her words clipped and cold. Silas, don't make me regret marrying you. Silas's face was ashen, his nails digging into his palms. Zara strode out of the room, leaving him alone with the mess. Caleb Reed, I will never let you get away with this. Late that night, Zara sat alone in a bar, downing drink after drink. The alcohol burned her throat, but couldn't extinguish the pain raging in her chest. She took out her phone and once again pulled up Caleb's social media profile. He hadn't posted in a long time. The last update was a photo from before their wedding. A city skyline bathed in a golden sunset, quiet and serene, with a simple two-word caption, goodbye. It was a goodbye, just not the one Zara had imagined. Their meeting on the bridge had been completely unexpected. She stared at the photo, her mind drifting back to a time when Caleb would stand quietly behind her, just waiting for her to look his way. But Zara had never truly looked at him. The bartender slid a freshly made drink toward her. Tough night, Miss Sterling. You're drinking pretty hard. Zara didn't answer, her eyes fixed on a bracelet on the bartender's wrist. The jade was unremarkable, but the style was strangely familiar. She grabbed his wrist, her voice tight. Where did you get this? The bartender, startled, stammered. This is my girlfriend's. She said she bought it at a pawn shop. Zara's heart ceased. She looked closer. The bracelet was more familiar than ever. Can I take it off to look? Sure, I guess. It's not worth much. Is there something special about it? Ignoring him, Zara held the bracelet up to the dim light. She saw a faint scratch on its surface. It was his mother's, the one he'd sold when she was broke and struggling to find a job, unable to afford a decent suit. Caleb had secretly sold this bracelet to get her one. She remembered him wearing it once, laughing as he told her how he'd gotten the scratch as a mischievous kid. Besides, I don't wear it much. It's a waste just sitting around. But she knew it was not only his most valuable possession at the time, but the only thing his mother had left him. And now it was being passed around cheaply, worn on a stranger's wrist. Zara shot to her feet, threw a wad of cash on the bar, and stumbled out with the bracelet. The cold air did nothing to sober her up, but it stung her eyes until they were red. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Start digging. I want to know where Caleb is right now. And I want you to find out everything Silas Vance was doing during his years abroad. The thought came out of nowhere, but years of instinct were screaming at her. Zara stood in the shadows of her study, clutching a freshly delivered investigation report. Her intuition had been right. The edges of the paper were crumpled in her fist, her knuckles white from the force. Her assistant stood nearby, head bowed. Miss Sterling, as you requested, we looked into Mr. Vance's activities over the past 7 years. In addition to the Maldives photos, we found some unusual financial transactions. Zara's eyes landed on one page. For the last 3 years, Silas's private account had made a monthly wire transfer of $1 to an offshore account labeled consulting fees. The recipient was a shell corporation controlled by a man named Lee. This Mr. Lee, isn't he the vice president of Horizon Group, who was convicted of embezzlement last year? Zara's voice was like ice. Yes. And what's more suspicious? The assistant handed her another file. A week before Mr. Vance returned to the country, that same account received a sudden deposit of $1 million. The sender was listed as Chairman Vance. Zara slammed the file shut. She thought of Silas's strange insistence on marrying Beatrice after his return and her parents' bizarre enthusiasm for the match. Keep digging, she ordered, her jaw tight. Especially all of the Vance family's financial movements around the time of my family's bankruptcy 7 years ago. In a private room at a late-night lounge, Zara threw a stack of photos in front of Silas. Explain this, she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. Why did your father transfer $1 million to a Swiss bank account the day after my father died? Silas's smile froze. The photos clearly showed bank statements, the money trail leading to an offshore account with no connection to the Vance family. Zara, listen to me. He reached for her, but she shoved him away. And this? Zara pressed play on her phone. Silas's voice, slurred from alcohol, filled the room. My dad got rid of old man Sterling back then, and he can do it again. The recording stopped. It was from a night he'd had too much to drink. The blood drained from Silas's face. Your family, Zara said, her eyes like poisoned daggers. You were the murderers all along. You only got close to me again to make sure I wasn't investigating the truth. As she turned to leave, Silas burst into hysterical laughter. You think Caleb Reed is any better? He and Beatrice Thorne were already. Shut up, Zara lunged, her hand closing around his throat before she forced herself to let go. Don't you ever say his name again. Caleb had just stepped out of a meeting. Beatrice had dragged him in first thing in the morning, and after listening to hours of financial reports, his head was still spinning. His assistant hurried over as he emerged. Sir, Miss Sterling is downstairs. She says she needs to see you. Caleb paused. Then his expression remained neutral. Tell her I'm busy. The assistant didn't leave. She looked hesitant, but said, It's very important. She said she won't leave until she sees you. Caleb was silent for a moment before finally heading toward the elevator. In the first-floor lobby, Zara stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her back rigid and lonely. At the sound of footsteps, she spun around, her eyes locking onto him. Caleb. Caleb stopped, keeping a safe distance. What is it? Zara's eyes darted around for a moment before she spoke, her voice hoarse. I found a bracelet. Caleb's gaze flickered but quickly returned to a calm neutrality. And you came all this way just for that? It was your mother's, Zara said, her voice beginning to tremble. You sold it without a second thought just to buy me a decent suit. Caleb watched her quietly, not denying it. Zara's eyes were red. She took a step forward, wanting to hug him. I'm sorry. Miss Sterling. A cold voice cut her off. Beatrice strode out of the elevator, her suit immaculate, her eyes sharp. She walked directly to Caleb's side and linked her arm with his, her posture both intimate and possessive. You seem to be confused, Miss Sterling. This is not the place for a trip down memory lane. Beatrice smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. If you have urgent business, you can make an appointment. Zara stared at their entwined hands. Her own fists clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. My business with him is none of your concern, Beatrice. Beatrice raised an eyebrow, her tone light and dismissive. Oh, but he's my husband now. His business is my business. Rage flared in Zara's eyes. She hissed, Beatrice, don't push it. Beatrice laughed coldly, refusing to back down. Push it? Who's the one pushing it? Did you forget who was the one who left him stranded on the side of the road to run off to another man? Zara's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't answer. She turned to Caleb, her voice now small, almost pleading. Caleb, can we please talk? Please. Caleb had been a silent observer until now. When she looked at him again, he finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it was a knife that twisted deep in her heart. Zara, your regret has nothing to do with me. Zara froze, watching as he turned and walked away side by side with Beatrice. This time, he didn't look back. Zara left the Thorne Group building in a daze. Her phone rang. It was Silas. She stood on the sidewalk for a long time, letting the call go to voicemail. This seemed to infuriate the person on the other end. A storm of notifications followed, messages ranging from questions and accusations to pleas and curses. Zara finally turned her phone off completely and threw it onto the back seat. She stared up at the towering skyscraper as if she could see past the glass and steel, all the way to Caleb. The next day, when Caleb walked into the building, he felt the strange looks from all around him. The receptionist's smile was strained. When he stepped into the elevator, the other employees fell silent, their gazes shifting uncomfortably. He frowned slightly. When he pushed open his office door, his assistant shot up from her desk. Mr. Reed, have you seen the business headlines today? What is it? She handed him a tablet. A bold, oversized headline screamed from the screen. The Social Climber's Playbook, 7 years as a stand-in, a calculated marriage into wealth, and a con man's rise to power. The article was accompanied by old photos of him with Zara and pictures from his wedding to Beatrice. The text was sensational, claiming Caleb was nothing more than Silas Vance's replacement who had seized his chance when Zara was at her lowest. When he realized he couldn't secure his position after her comeback, he had quickly moved on to seduce the Thorn heiress with masterful manipulation. Most damningly, the article ended by implying his marriage to Beatrice was built on hidden motives, even hinting at conflicts of interest and corporate espionage within the Thorn group. It all but called him a corporate spy who had married Beatrice for ulterior motives. A cold dread settled in Caleb's stomach, but his expression remained unchanged. He put the tablet down, his voice calm. "How's the stock?" His assistant's voice was worried. "It dropped percent at opening and is still falling." Caleb closed his eyes. Silas's revenge had been swift and brutal. "I don't care what it costs or what you have to do. Dig up everything you can on those media outlets." Beatrice hung up and looked at Caleb, the ferocity in her eyes not yet faded, but her tone softened. "You're here." Caleb walked to her desk, his voice full of guilt. "I'm sorry. I've dragged you and the company into this." Beatrice scoffed, not at him, but at the situation. She stood, took his hand, and led him to the sofa. "This kind of cheap shot is hardly a drag on the company." Her finger traced across the tablet displaying the article, the cold light illuminating the icy resolve in her eyes. "He's good at hitting where it hurts." A shame, really. A shame about what? A shame he seems to have forgotten that he has his own skeletons in the closet. Beatrice reached out and touched the side of Caleb's face. This time he didn't pull away, just looked at her. A genuine smile touched Beatrice's lips as her fingers gently straightened a stray lock of his hair. "There's a business gala tonight. All the major investors in the Asia-Pacific region will be there. You're coming with me. Are you going to fight back publicly?" Beatrice's voice dropped. "Of course. And I'm going to make it very clear to everyone who they can afford to mess with and who they can't." Caleb's heart pounded as the sunlight faded and the room grew dim. Beatrice's voice seemed to take on a chilling edge, like a venomous snake preparing to strike. The gala was held on the top floor of the Grand Imperial Hotel. The air was thick with perfume and the low hum of conversation as industry titans mingled. But the moment Beatrice entered with Caleb on her arm, a hush fell over the room. Caleb was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his skin looking like snow under the lights. Beatrice wore a black strapless dress, its hem matching the color of his tie. The wedding rings on their fingers sparkled under the chandeliers. She held his hand the entire time, her thumb gently stroking his palm in a silent, reassuring gesture. "Miss Thorne, a pleasure." A middle-aged man raised his glass, his eyes drifting toward Caleb. "This must be Mr. Reed. Just as striking as the rumors say." "You're too kind, Mr. Chun," Beatrice said with a smile, her left arm linked with Caleb's. "My husband isn't fond of these events. He's making an exception for me tonight, so please don't scare him off." Before anyone could react, she leaned in and, in front of everyone, kissed his forehead. Caleb's ears burned, but he played along, wrapping his arm around her waist. A wave of good-natured laughter went through the crowd, but the whispers in the corners never ceased. "I thought they were on the rocks. This doesn't look like an act. Looks like those reports really were just rumors." Beatrice acted as if she heard nothing, leading Caleb through the crowd, greeting people and making small talk. With every smile and shared glance, the rumors seemed to dissolve. Then a gasp rippled through the room. "Miss Sterling is here." Caleb turned and met Zara's intense gaze. She stood alone. "Would you like me to continue the story and describe the confrontation between the three of them at the gala?" At the entrance, the dark circles under Zara's eyes were visible even from a distance. Silas was not with her. She had come alone. Zara's eyes were locked on Caleb, but when Beatrice shifted to block his view, her expression darkened. She strode toward them, her voice hoarse. "Caleb, we need to talk." Beatrice laughed coldly, stepping in front of Caleb. "Wrong time, wrong place, Miss Sterling." Zara ignored her, her eyes fixed on Caleb. "I found something out about the attack at the hospital." Caleb's fingers twitched. Beatrice, sensing his reaction, tightened her grip on his arm, her voice dangerously low. "Zara, don't make a scene." But Zara pulled a digital voice recorder from her pocket and pressed play. Silas's voice filled the air, sharp and clear. "Yeah, I hired them. So what? A piece of trash like Caleb Reed doesn't deserve to be part of the Sterling family. I wanted to make his life a living hell. I wanted to ruin him." The recording stopped. The room was dead silent. Zara's eyes were red, her voice barely a whisper. Caleb, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he. Caleb looked at her and suddenly laughed. Zara, are you apologizing now to get my forgiveness? Or to make yourself feel better? Zara froze. He didn't look at her again. He turned, took Beatrice's hand, and said, Let's go. I'm tired. Beatrice led him away, but as they passed Zara, she leaned in and whispered, See you in the headlines tomorrow, Miss Sterling. Zara stood frozen, watching Caleb's back disappear into the glittering ballroom. His steps were calm and steady, and Beatrice's arm was linked firmly with his, an unbreakable anchor. They hadn't even glanced back at her. The whispers around her swelled like a tide. Miss Sterling looks terrible, so it was Silas Vance who hired people to attack him. No wonder the Thornstock suddenly bounced back today. This is all-out war. Every word was a knife, plunging into her already bleeding chest. I wanted to ruin him. And Caleb, she remembered his last smile. So calm it was cruel. Your regret has nothing to do with me. Zara felt an invisible hand squeezing her heart, the pain so intense she could hardly breathe. Miss Sterling, her assistant approached cautiously. The car is ready. Are you? Get away from me. Zara shoved him aside and stumbled onto the terrace. The cold night wind couldn't clear the agony churning inside her. She pulled out her phone, the screen still on Caleb's social media page. Half an hour ago, he had reposted a photo from the Thorn Group's PR department. In it, Beatrice was leaning on his shoulder, a faint smile on her lips, the snowflake diamond ring on her finger shining brightly. Zara stared at the image of them together and started to laugh. How ironic. He had once given her all his gentleness, and she had never cherished it. And now, he couldn't even be bothered to hate her. Meanwhile, in the hotel's underground parking garage, Beatrice opened the car door, but Caleb remained standing still. What's wrong? She asked, frowning slightly. Caleb looked at the distant, glittering city lights. Thank you for earlier. Beatrice's frown eased. She leaned against the car door, tilting her head. For what? For not attacking Zara on the spot. Caleb turned to look at her, a flicker of light in his eyes. I know you're holding back. Beatrice scoffed, then reached out, her hand closing around the back of his neck, pulling him closer. Caleb Reed, she said, her voice a little hoarse. You need to remember something. I held back, but not for her. It was because. Her thumb finally brushed against his cool cheek, her tone uncharacteristically serious. I want you to be the one to end it. Caleb's breath hitched. The wind swirled through the garage, lifting the hair at his temples. Beatrice's gaze fell to his lips, but in the end, she just opened the car door for him. Let's go home. He had only meant to bring her a cup of coffee. Beatrice had been working late every night, and he was worried about her. He brewed a cup of her favorite Blue Mountain coffee himself. But as he approached her study, he heard low voices from inside. He was about to turn and leave when he heard an unexpected name. The Sterling Corporation's cash flow problem back then, your father definitely had a hand in it. His steps halted. But the reason Zara Sterling's father jumped was not because of your father. There was more to it. The coffee cup tilted in his hand, a brown stain spreading silently across the saucer. The information in those two sentences made Caleb take an involuntary step back, knocking over a vase by the door. The sharp clatter echoed down the hallway, startling the people in the study. The door was yanked open. Beatrice stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light, a flicker of surprise in her eyes behind her glasses. Caleb's gaze was drawn to the scattered files on the floor. He'd never felt his eyesight was so sharp. They were detailed investigation reports on the Sterling bankruptcy from 7 years ago, each page stamped with a red, confidential seal. They stood facing each other, the air thick with tension. Beatrice's assistant took the hint and discreetly left. You're investigating the Sterlings? Caleb heard himself ask, his voice unnervingly calm. Beatrice didn't deny it. She bent down to pick up the files, her movements composed as if she were just tidying up a normal contract. Yes. May I ask why? Beatrice took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. The gesture made her, a woman who was always in control, look uncharacteristically tired. My father and Zara Sterling's father were once partners. She walked to the window with the files, her back to him, her voice low. 30 years ago, they founded an investment firm together. Later, the Sterling family forged evidence to frame my father, and sent him to prison so they could take over the market. Caleb stood silently, his breathing growing shallow. We had gathered enough evidence for an appeal, but he had a sudden heart attack in prison. He never made it. Beatrice turned around, her eyes frighteningly calm. I was 12. Caleb looked into her calm eyes and suddenly remembered the oppressive portraits in the Thorne mansion, the cold glint in her grandfather's eyes, and the way Beatrice herself would occasionally let slip a deep-seated hostility towards the Sterling family. So that was it. Everything made sense now. So, Caleb heard his own voice tremble. So you only got close to me to get revenge on Zara? Beatrice didn't answer immediately. She walked toward him, reaching out to touch his face. But when she saw him instinctively flinch, her hand stopped in midair. At first, yes. Caleb hated being deceived, but he never thought hearing the truth would be so painful. The problem was, it wasn't the truth he wanted to hear. And in that moment, all he could think was, why couldn't you have just lied to me? He thought he would break down, that he would scream, but strangely, he was calm. I understand. It's what the Sterlings owed you. They deserved it. Caleb put down the coffee cup, the porcelain making a sharp clink against the table. But you shouldn't have lied to me. He turned to leave, but Beatrice grabbed his wrist. I didn't lie to you. Her palm was burning, her grip so tight it hurt. The initial reason doesn't matter. Beatrice moved closer, her hot breath fanning across his ear. What matters is now. Her other hand moved to the back of his neck, forcing him to meet her gaze. Now, I truly want to spend the rest of my life with you. Caleb looked into the dark, churning sea of her eyes, and suddenly smiled. Beatrice, do you know what I hate most? He pried her fingers off one by one. It's people like you, who always hide their true feelings behind a wall of calculations. It had been 2 weeks since he moved out of the Thorne estate. Beatrice hadn't tried to stop him, but every day, like clockwork, she had a bouquet of white roses delivered to him. The attached card always had the same simple message. It's sunny today. Can you forgive me yet? He always put the flowers in a vase in his office, but he never replied. Mr. Reed, the department heads are all here. His assistant's quiet reminder pulled him from his thoughts. Caleb turned and walked into the conference room. The executives of the Thorne Group watched him with varied expressions. This new master of the house had been parachuted into the management team, already a source of gossip. The recent rumors of his marital problems only fueled the ambitions of these old sharks. Let's begin. Caleb ignored them, opening his file. His voice was calm. Regarding the accounting issue at the Southeast Asia branch, I need an explanation from the finance department. A CFO wiped sweat from his brow. Well, it might be a system entry delay. A delay? Caleb tapped his tablet, and a series of figures appeared on the projection screen. For the past 3 years, a $2 million payment has been delayed in arriving on the TH of every month, only to be delayed in being transferred out before the end of the month. What do they call that in an audit again? He looked up, a small smile on his lips. They call it embezzlement. The room fell silent. That night, Beatrice's private number, which she rarely used, called him. Caleb stared at the screen for 3 seconds before answering. Mr. Reed, quite the power move. Her voice was laced with a smile. It only took you 1 day to root out a parasite the finance department has been feeding for 10 years. Caleb leaned back on his sofa, his tone flat. According to our agreement, I am obligated to assist you with corporate matters. Besides, you wanted to get rid of them for a long time. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Just the agreement? He didn't answer. Beatrice suddenly laughed softly. There's a charity auction tomorrow. I need you to be there. The agreement doesn't include playing pretend with you. It's not pretend. Her voice turned serious. My grandfather is watching closely. If you don't show up, those old geezers will think we're really splitting up and try to make a move. Caleb thought of the probing looks he'd gotten in the meeting. He pursed his lips. What time? He heard the rustle of papers on the other end and could almost picture the smirk on Beatrice's face. 7. I'll pick you up. At the auction, Silas, holding a glass of champagne, deliberately bumped into Caleb. Just as the glass was about to spill, a figure cut in between them. Zara grabbed Silas's wrist, and the champagne drenched her own suit jacket. Have you had enough? She said coldly, shaking him off. She turned to Caleb. Are you okay? Caleb took a step back, right into the arms of Beatrice, who had just arrived. Thank you, Miss Sterling. Beatrice steadied him, her smile not reaching her eyes. But I'll protect my husband myself. No need to trouble you. Zara stared at their joined hands, her voice low. Caleb, I need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, Caleb interrupted, his voice soft but firm. Zara, stop doing these pointless things. He took Beatrice's hand and led her away, not seeing the color drain from Zara's face. In the car on the way back, Beatrice suddenly spoke. You called her Zara. Caleb looked out the window, confused. You used to call her Miss Sterling to keep your distance. But today was different. It means you're really starting to let her go. Her fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel. Caleb finally turned to look at her. You seem to be good at analyzing people. Only you. The streetlights cast fleeting shadows across her sharp profile. Caleb suddenly realized that at some point, the calculating woman he'd met no longer looked at him through a mask. Just like now, her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, betraying the tension beneath her calm exterior. Just take me back to my apartment. Beatrice's jaw tightened. Okay. When the car stopped in front of his building, Caleb didn't get out right away. I'll organize the documents for Monday's board meeting and send them to you tomorrow night, he said. Beatrice froze, then it dawned on her. Those documents were all in her study at the estate. Okay, she said, her voice hoarse but tinged with a hopeful excitement. I'll be waiting. The night wind ruffled Caleb's hair. He stood under the streetlight watching Beatrice's car. She didn't drive away. It was just like that day in the auditorium, when he stood in the shadows watching the girl shining on stage. Only this time, someone was finally waiting for him. He was taken from the underground parking garage. Caleb had just finished a meeting, the sound of his dress shoes sharp on the concrete floor. The garage lights flickered. He was looking down, fumbling for his car keys, when he heard hurried footsteps behind him. He started to turn, but a cloth soaked in ether was pressed hard over his mouth and nose. As he struggled, all he could see was a pair of bright red sneakers and Silas's twisted smile. Caleb Reed. No, the husband of Beatrice Thorne. A voice hissed like a snake. Let's play a game. Beatrice was in a meeting with her assistant when the call came. You're saying the Vances were also involved in my father's company's downfall? Yes. According to our investigation, Mr. Sterling and Mr. Vance had a private agreement. But after everything was done, Mr. Vance held something back. He used the cause of your father's death to demand shares from Mr. Sterling. In the ensuing argument, he accidentally killed him and staged it to look like a suicide. Insatiable greed, Beatrice murmured, leaning back in her chair. Just then, her phone rang. If you want your husband to live, bring me the evidence of the Vance family's hidden assets. Silas's voice was distorted by a voice changer. Tonight, p.m., the abandoned chemical plant on the west side. Don't call the police, or I'll slit his throat. The moment the call ended, Beatrice slammed her pen on the table so hard it shattered, ink bleeding in her palm like blood. Her assistant rushed back in. Miss Thorne, we just found out Silas Vance has mortgaged all his assets to short our stock. He's going for broke. Get Zara Sterling on the phone. Now, Beatrice ordered, her eyes blazing. That night, the rusted iron gates of the chemical plant creaked in the wind. Zara stood in the shadows, watching Beatrice arrive alone. I didn't think you'd call me. That's not important. Beatrice's face was a mask of cold fury. She strode past Zara, heading straight for the building. When a factory door was kicked open, Silas was holding a knife to Caleb's chin. Look who's here, he sneered. Your wife and your ex-fiancé. Beatrice's eyes were locked on Caleb. Only after confirming he wasn't seriously hurt did she speak. Let him go. I have what you want. She held up a silver USB drive. But Zara suddenly stepped forward. Silas, I have evidence that your father was involved in embezzling from my family's company. Silas's face twisted in fury. Chaos erupted. Silas screamed and lunged at Caleb with a knife. Zara threw herself in front of him. The sound of the blade sinking into flesh was sickeningly clear. Caleb watched as Zara crumpled before him, blood pouring from her abdomen, staining his sleeves. Zara, he gasped, reaching for his face. But her hand fell limply to her side. Beatrice's bodyguards quickly subdued Silas. Beatrice herself rushed to Caleb, wrapping him in her coat, holding his trembling body. It's okay, she murmured, kissing the top of his head over and over. It's okay, I'm here. But Caleb couldn't look away from Zara. Her blood was so red as the sunset on the day she had first kissed him 7 years ago. Under the harsh white lights of the hospital hallway, Beatrice pressed a cup of hot tea into Caleb's cold hands. The doctor said she's out of danger, she said softly. You should rest. I'll stay here. Caleb shook his head. I want to wait until she wakes up. Beatrice was silent for a moment. Then she knelt before him, looking up into his face. Caleb Reed, look at me. He stared at her, dazed. I admit, I approached you at first to get revenge on the Sterlings. She gripped his hands, her hold so tight it was almost painful. But now, I would rather it was me lying in that bed than watch you shed a single tear for her. Beatrice Thorne, the woman who lived by logic and calculation, was saying something so utterly irrational. Caleb's tears finally fell, splashing onto their joined hands. A nurse hurried over. Miss Sterling is awake. She's asking to see Mr. Reed. In the hospital room, Zara's face was paler than the sheets. She motioned for the nurse to get a black notebook from a nightstand and hand it to Caleb. I was going to take this to my grave, she said with a weak smile. Caleb opened it. His eyes began to burn. July rain. Caleb stayed up late again tonight, organizing files for me. He put 2 sugars in my coffee. He always remembers. I think I'm starting to get addicted to this warmth. September sunny. Silas is back. I thought my heart would race, but when I look at him, all I see is Caleb's face. The last entry was from the day they broke up. I lost him. Tears blurred his vision. Caleb gently closed the diary. It's all in the past, he said to Zara, his voice gentle but resolute. I'm grateful you saved my life, but we can't go back. Zara closed her eyes, tears sliding from their corners. I know. She was finally letting him go, and in doing so, letting herself go too. Outside the room, Beatrice leaned against the wall, an unlit cigarette in her hand. When Caleb walked out, she immediately dropped it and opened her arms. He fell into her embrace, his voice choked. Take me home, he said. Beatrice held him tight, as if trying to merge him into her very bones. Okay, sign it. Her voice was calm, but the dark circles under her eyes betrayed days of sleepless nights. Caleb opened the file, his fingers paused. It was a transfer agreement for % of the Sterling Corporation's shares. I can't take this, he said, closing the file and pushing it back. You're just going abroad to recover. You'll be back. Zara smiled, a familiar stubbornness in her eyes. Consider it my atonement. Outside, a plane streaked across the sky, leaving a long white trail. Caleb finally signed the document, but changed the beneficiary to the Thorne Family Charitable Foundation. I don't need compensation, he said, looking up at her. Zara, we both need to move on. She stared at him for a long moment, then reached out and gently touched the wedding ring on his finger. Does she treat you well? Caleb looked out the window. Beatrice was leaning against her car, waiting for him, holding a paper bag from his favorite bakery. The sunlight on her shoulders was impossibly soft. Very well, he said quietly. Zara pulled her hand back and picked up her carry-on. That's all that matters. She walked toward the security gate, her back straight and proud, just like the girl who had stood in the spotlight of the auditorium when they first met. Silas stood on the steps of the courthouse, listening to the judge declare him guilty of kidnapping, and suddenly burst out laughing. His once perfectly styled hair was a matted mess, his lips cracked and dry, but his eyes were fixed on Caleb and Beatrice standing together nearby. You think you've won? He shrieked. Caleb Reed. What right does a piece of trash like you have to be happy? A bailiff grabbed his struggling shoulders. Realizing his fate, Silas found a burst of manic strength. He broke free and sprinted toward a running car parked at the curb. The engine roared. No one had time to react, except for Beatrice. She shoved Caleb out of the way, taking the full impact of the car herself. The world slowed down for Caleb. Beatrice's body flew through the air, landing limply on the pavement. Blood splattered on the stone lining by the courthouse entrance, a shocking, vivid red. Outside the ICU, Caleb mechanically signed the critical condition notice. The doctor's words floated in and out of focus. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe concussion. He stared through the glass at Beatrice, who was hooked up to a dozen machines, and suddenly remembered what she'd said that morning, refusing to get out of bed. Caleb, please, just 5 more minutes. How could someone like her exist? Someone who spoke the truest words of love in the most flippant tone. Someone who used the most calculating mind to do the most foolish things. The family can go in now, a nurse said gently. Caleb put on a sterile gown and cap and sat by her bed. Beatrice's face was whiter than the sheets, but the moment he took her hand, her eyelashes fluttered. You look so ugly when you cry. Her voice was a thread, but she was still trying to tease him. Caleb's tears fell onto her hand. You're an idiot. Beatrice laboriously lifted her fingers to wipe away his tears. If I'd known a damsel in distress act was this effective, I wouldn't have wasted so much time. The doctor said you can be discharged in a week if you keep recovering like this. Caleb peeled an apple, his voice calm, but his fingertips trembled slightly. It had been 3 days since Beatrice was moved out of the ICU, but he was still terrified. Beatrice lay in bed, the gauze on her forehead still faintly stained with blood, but her eyes were brighter than ever. She watched Caleb, her fingers gently tracing his, as if confirming he was real. She smiled. Worried about me? Caleb looked up, his eyes clear and steady, reflecting the sunlight from the window. Beatrice, I have something to tell you. She stilled, her playful expression softening as she waited. I'm willing to believe in your love, he said softly. I hope you won't let me down. Beatrice's breath caught, her heart seizing. She squeezed his fingers, her voice low and husky. Caleb read. I wish I'd met you sooner. She was wearing a stunning, form-fitting wedding gown, her hair and makeup perfect, but the smile in her eyes was hotter than the sun. When the officiant read the vows, Beatrice stared into his eyes and said, word for word, Caleb read, I'm not a person who says forever, but I'm making an exception today. I, Beatrice Thorne, will love only you for the rest of my life. Caleb smiled, but a tear slid down his cheek. You have to keep your word, Mrs. Thorne. Of course, she said, leaning down to kiss him with a solemn promise. Cross my heart. After the wedding, the butler handed him a letter. Caleb opened it. Inside was a single brief message. I'm sorry. I wish you happiness. It was signed by Zara. Beatrice wrapped her arms around him from behind, her chin resting on his shoulder. Are you going to write back? Caleb shook his head and folded the letter, setting it aside. There's no need. It's enough that we're all at peace. In a room at a psychiatric hospital, Silas huddled in a corner, clutching a locket. It was the one he had given Zara. A nurse came in with a package. Mr. Vance, delivery for you. Silas's head snapped up. He tore it open with a mad laugh, but his smile froze when he saw what was inside. It was the other half of the locket, Zura's. A note was attached with a few cold words, returning what's yours. We owe each other nothing. He screamed and hurled the locket against the wall. The sound of it shattering was sharp and final. Zara Sterling. Caleb read. I hope you both rot in hell. His screams echoed down the empty hallway, unheard and unanswered. 1 year later, at the Thorne estate, Beatrice was kneeling in the garden, carefully guiding Caleb's hand so he could touch a newly bloomed rose. Easy, don't prick yourself, she said, her brow furrowed as if facing a major crisis. Caleb laughed. Beatrice, you're spoiling me. Doesn't matter, she sniffed, then turned to the head gardener. Replace all these roses with lavender. Fewer thorns. Caleb shook his head in amusement. Ever since he'd caught a bad fever, Beatrice had completely transformed from the rebellious heiress to this. Company meetings were held online if possible. All social events were delegated to her vice president, and she was home every day for dinner. She'd even learned to make soup. One night, Beatrice couldn't sleep and was just stroking his hair. Caleb opened his eyes, which reflected the soft moonlight. Did I wake you? She reached out and caressed his face. Caleb read. I'm so happy. She paused, then leaned down and kissed him, her voice melting into the night. Me too,